I fell in love with this series. She is obsessed with dragons. Those are not generally books that I gravitate toward. It definitely gives those Victorian England vibes. Little snarky comment here because it's not really a scandal, but people see it as a scandal. And ride dragons. Definitely get to the third book so you can get to the dragon bone glimpse on your newly downloaded Libby app that you got with your new library card. Hello friends, welcome back to a Very Bookish Vlogmas where I am diving deep into my 2023 reading challenge. I'm going to be going over the books that I read as well as things I liked, didn't like, tropes that I'm over, tropes that I'd love to see more of, and everything in between. If you haven't seen the first video, I encourage you to hop over there because I give a rundown of my book rating system. Today we are going to be diving into what I call a sleeper series. This is a book series I had no idea about and I absolutely loved. This was actually a book series that the Libby app suggested to me. Now let me stop right here. If you do not have the Libby app, I highly encourage you to get this app. It is absolutely amazing. First of all, you're gonna need a library card. And if you don't have a library card, now is the time to go get a library card. Libraries are full of resources and books. So if you're like me and you're on a tight budget and you can't just go buy every book that you like on a whim, then the library is a great place for you. Once you have your library card, you can download the Libby app and it connects to that library card and it gives you access to hundreds of thousands of audiobooks and books that you could read like on a Kindle or on your phone. The Libby app has saved me a lot of money, a lot of time, and if I don't end up liking a book, I'm so glad that I saw it on Libby instead of purchasing it and spending money that I didn't need to spend. Please, please, please go check out the Libby app or go get your library card. Okay. Back to this series. It is called The Memoirs of Lady Trent. This series is about a very feisty female character. They've got dragons, science, so many cool things that I absolutely adored. There are 5 books in the major series. There are technically 8 books total because there are a couple of novellas and extra stories in between there that I learned about later, but I'm going to be going over the major 5 books. The first one is A Natural History of Dragons. Here we meet our main character, Isabella Camhurst. Now, this entire series is told retrospectively. Isabella is older and she's telling the story of her life and how she became a dragon naturalist. This is set in Scotland, which of course doesn't exist, but it definitely gives those Victorian England vibes. Isabella grows up in this time period where women are expected to get married and have children. But of course, she is obsessed with dragons. This first book starts off with diving into her life as a child and her inquisitive mind and how people really tried to squash that, but she's a stubborn gal and she pushed through that with her father's help. Eventually, she's pressured into needing to get married, but it ends up being okay because her dad, who's really, really precious, sets her up with a man who has a phenomenal library because she's a bookish girl, and they end up falling in love, getting married, and she goes on the first voyage to Vistrana. And Vistrana is a very cold environment, and she gets to have this whole adventure seeing dragons for the first time in the wild, sketching them out, getting a lot more information, and meeting new people. This first book sets us up for the next 4 books where she will be taking different voyages and learning about different dragons. By the end of her adventures in Vistrana, I was hooked. In the second book, we move to a tropical climate, which is a lot of fun. It's called the Tropic of Serpents, and we are brought back to an old associate. This happens a couple of years after the first book, and a runaway heiress is also involved in here, which is a total fun addition. She's such a fun character. I absolutely love that Natalie is added into this book. There's a lot of scandal, of course, because a woman who is out and about, traipsing about in another country, doing things that a woman should not be doing, is gonna bring a lot of hilarity because it's not really a scandal, but people see it as a scandal. She travels to what's called the Green Hell, and she spends a lot of time among the Moolish people. This book reminded me of the Amazon rainforest. Obviously, this is a fictional world, but it reminded me very much of the Amazon and the tribes that live among the Amazon rainforest. And so she spends a lot of time among the Moolish people, which is a lot of fun. This book, a lot of people struggled with because it was slower. And I will say the entire book series, it's slower. It's not super fast paced. So keep that in mind. There's a lot more politics in this book. A lot of people didn't like that. I actually really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed seeing how much she really wanted to study dragons from this very pure and passionate place, and how much politics plays into that, and really put up a wall that she had to kind of play that game in order to get to her goal of studying dragons. The third book might be my favorite. It's set on the sea, and I love the ocean. I love the water. So we've got some dragons that are in the water, which are a lot of fun. Very different from the first two dragons that we see in the first and second book. So the third one is called The Voyage of the Basilisk, and she spends 2 years, she raises all this money with her old associate, who are now friends, which is great. And they spend 2 years at sea going to all these different locations to study these dragons. We have some old characters, we have some new characters. This one we get to see a lot more of the relationship between her and her son, which I absolutely adore. I love how their relationship grows because she's a really wonderful mother. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but in the beginning, when she first becomes a mother, she really struggles with wanting to be a mother and having that traditional nurturing aspect. It's not that she didn't love her son, just in that day and age, they wanted her to be a wife and a mother. And of course, she wants to go off on crazy adventures and go find dragons and ride dragons. Being a mom with a toddler was a struggle for her. In this third book, Jake is older now, and we really see this sweet relationship growing because she's a Spitfire, he's a Spitfire, and this really wonderful way of parenting. I really enjoyed that aspect. We also get a new love interest, and let me tell you, it's a slow burn. It is like a slow burn, but it's so worth it. I love all of the characters that they are introduced. This is also a book where there are like these dragon blimps. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a dragon bone blimp, and they are really cool. They are introduced in this book. They're still being developed. Still a lot of politics and kind of wars that are going on, that Isabella, of course, makes trouble. Not on purpose, but just because she's very inquisitive and finds herself in very precarious situations because of her curiosity. Definitely get to the third book so you can get to the Dragonbone blimps. Definitely worth it. The fourth book, we end up in more of a Saharan type of environment. In the dust, we have that continuation of that slow burn romance. We get her brother, who I love, her brother Andrew, plays a really big role in this book, which is a lot of fun. Again, we have old characters who we've come to love. She's on another voyage to Achaia. It's a blast. It's more of the same wild ride. Lots of situations that she finds herself in that you're like, how on earth did this happen? And yet I am not surprised that we are back here in this very precarious situation. And will we die or will we survive? I don't know. The final book in the series takes place in kind of like a Himalayan environment, which I love. I love the snow. This one takes place in Ariga. And if you stick it out to Book 5, you get to see the dragon blimps come into play. Like, they have a pretty big role, especially in the front end of the book. That's kind of a quick rundown of the series without giving too many spoilers away. I rated these 5 across the board, absolutely loved them. I don't even care that other people didn't like them as much. 5-star across the board. I fell in love with this series because Isabella is so snarky in such a subtle way. And I know I've said this before, but I love humor that's just dry and gets you. It's kind of spicy, but you don't realize it until you read it and keep going and realize, oh my gosh, you just did a thing there, and that's funny. This book has a lot of that. A little snarky comment here, a turn of phrase there. She is odd, she's eccentric, but she's determined. She loves books. She's smart, she's caring. She's a very interesting character, and you get to see her character development over the course of 5 books. She is so curious. She ends up in these situations, and you'll hear her talk about it in the way she talks about it, kind of like, well, that was dumb, but you know, I got to learn some really cool things, and had I not made that decision, I would not be writing this book. So it's a lot of fun to hear her perspective of how she gets herself out of really difficult situations. I was surprised that I liked this book as much as I did because the writing style is very much scientific. It does feel like you are reading a memoir from somebody who really is a dragon naturalist and giving some very detailed accounts of these voyages. So it doesn't read like an adventure novel. It reads more this kind of scientific point by point. This is what I did. This is how we got here. This is how this discovery came to be. This is how this added to the knowledge of dragons. Da 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 da. Those are not generally books that I gravitate toward. I don't know how Marie Brennan did it, but I loved that style. I loved that writing style. It was very interesting and intriguing. With that said, I think this might be a better audiobook than reading it. I did notice a lot of people said some of these books felt very slow and boring because they incorporate political aspects of what it looks like to go to another country and make sure that everything's copacetic before moving into native territory and establishing relationships with those tribes or those native peoples in a way that is not taking, but instead learning and growing and being helpful if there's a way that you can be helpful. I can understand why people might have gotten bored reading that. So I would highly encourage the audiobook. It's really great. I loved the narrator, loved her voice, very soothing, love a great accent. Wish I had an accent, but that's okay. The world building is very light and airy. It's very easy. It's not complex. It's a world in which you believe that, oh yeah, dragons exist. It's written in that way, which makes it feel so fun. Because you're reading it thinking, or listening to it, in my case, you're listening to it thinking, well, of course there are dragons. Like, why would we ever think there aren't dragons? And finally, what I really loved about this book series is that it was slower. Sometimes that super hardcore, fast-paced book, I kind of get over it. Sometimes I get tired of a hardcore, fast-paced book that employs a lot of devices to get me through the book really, really quickly on purpose. That's very easy to read. Sometimes I want a book that takes a little bit more time, that you have to think a little bit more about. I love a slow-paced book. It really, really doesn't bother me. I do love a slow-paced book if it's interesting, and that definitely was the case for this one. That is the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. I hope you'll give it a chance. I highly encourage you to listen to it on your newly downloaded Libby app that you got with your new library card that you definitely went and did when I said. Give it a listen. Let me know what you think. Do you agree with me? Do you not agree with me? Do you think I'm crazy? I would love to know your thoughts. If you've read this series, also let me know what you think. And I will see you next time, and we will be diving into another series that I highly enjoyed. See you soon.